Extraterrestrial celebration planners study human traditions because our joy is authentic. Part 1. Ambassador Sarah stared at the formal request on her desk for the third time that morning. In 15 years of diplomatic service, she had received many strange requests from alien species, but this one might be the strangest yet. The Galactic Confederation wanted to send observers to Earth, not to study human technology, which was primitive by galactic standards, not to examine human biology or culture in the usual academic sense. No, the Grand Celebration Directorate wanted to study human parties. Sarah pressed the communication button. Within seconds, the holographic form of coordinator materialized above her desk. The looked like a tall, slender mantis with opalescent skin that shifted through soft colors as he moved. "Coordinator," Sarah said carefully, "I want to make sure I understand your request correctly. You want to send celebration planners to Earth to observe our festivals, weddings, and other gatherings." "That is correct, Ambassador." His voice came through the translator as smooth and emotionless. "The Confederation faces a crisis that we did not anticipate." Sarah leaned forward. A crisis that involved parties seemed unlikely, but she had learned never to dismiss alien concerns out of hand. "What kind of crisis?" The coordinator's colors shifted to something darker, almost gray. "Our celebrations have become meaningless. We have optimized them to perfection, and in doing so, we have lost something essential." Over the next hour, explained the situation. They planned their festivals with mathematical precision, scheduling every moment of joy down to the nanosecond. They used pheromone optimization to ensure perfect social harmony at their gatherings. The crystalline shard created resonance patterns that produced exact emotional frequencies. Every species in the Confederation had developed their own sophisticated methods for creating celebrations. The problem was that nobody felt anything anymore. "We perform our celebrations perfectly," said, his colors dimming further. "Every ritual is executed without flaw. Every moment unfolds as planned. And yet when they end, we feel empty, as if we have eaten a meal that looked perfect but had no taste." Sarah thought about the last wedding she had attended. Her cousin Mike's ceremony had been a disaster by any objective measure. The flower girl had thrown a tantrum, the priest mixed up the couple's names, and someone's elderly aunt had gotten drunk and told embarrassing stories during the reception. Yet everyone had laughed until they cried, and 2 years later, people still talked about what a wonderful day it had been. "I think I understand," Sarah said. "You want to see how humans celebrate because our methods are less advanced." "No," said, and his colors suddenly brightened to something almost hopeful. "We want to understand why your celebrations work when ours do not. We have studied your broadcasts and historical records. Human celebrations are chaotic, inefficient, and frequently fail to execute as planned. Yet the emotional resonance we detect suggests that humans experience joy at levels we can barely comprehend." Sarah smiled. "When can your observers arrive?" 3 weeks later, I stepped off the shuttle in rural Oregon, where a human wedding was scheduled to take place. She was young for a researcher, barely 200 years old, and she approached the assignment with scientific enthusiasm. Her task was simple: observe, record, and analyze the human celebration using standard galactic metrics. She had studied the wedding plan extensively. The ceremony would take place at 3 p.m. in a garden venue. Exactly 68 guests would attend. The reception would follow a structured schedule: cocktail hour, dinner, speeches, cake cutting, and dancing. By standards, it was a crude plan with enormous gaps and inefficiencies, but it was a plan nonetheless. I arrived early to set up her observation equipment. The garden was decorated with flowers and white chairs arranged in neat rows. A wooden arch stood at the front, covered in more flowers. By human standards, it looked pleasant. By galactic standards, it was quaint and simple. The first sign that things would not go according to plan came at 2:47 p.m., when dark clouds rolled in from the west. By 2:55 p.m., rain was falling steadily. I watched with fascination as the humans scrambled to move everything inside a nearby barn. The neat rows of chairs became a jumbled crowd. The flower arch wouldn't fit through the door, so someone hastily created a new one using a ladder and some loose flowers. The ceremony began 23 minutes late. I noted this in her records as a significant deviation from plan. Then something unexpected happened. The bride walked down the narrow barn aisle and every human in the room turned to look at her. A's sensors detected a massive spike in emotional output. The bride was crying. Several other humans were crying. By medical standards, this crying indicated severe distress. But the humans were smiling while they cried. The groom started crying too when the bride reached him. He tried to speak his vows but had to stop twice to compose himself. The crowd laughed, but it was a warm sound, not mocking. An elderly human woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes with a cloth and whispered, "Oh, they're perfect together." A's analytical framework struggled to process what she was observing. Crying plus smiling equaled what? Her database had no category for this emotional state. The ceremony continued with more deviations. The best man dropped the rings and they rolled under a chair. A small child shouted, "I have to pee," in the middle of the vows, causing widespread laughter. The officiant mixed up his prepared speech and had to improvise. Each mistake should have reduced the celebration's quality. Instead, A's sensors showed emotional engagement increasing with each imperfection. The reception was worse from an optimization standpoint. The caterer had miscalculated the portions, so the vegetarian option ran out. The cake, which was supposed to be an elaborate three-tiered structure, had partially collapsed on one side during transport. The sound system failed twice during the speeches. And yet, the humans were having the time of their lives. When the vegetarian food ran out, people shared their meat dishes with the vegetarians, creating new combinations and laughing about the improvisation. When the guests saw the lopsided cake, they gathered around it taking pictures and declaring it charmingly imperfect. When the sound system failed, the best man simply shouted his speech louder, and the crowd moved closer to hear him. The dancing began with no structure or pattern. Humans of all ages moved to the music in completely different ways, some skilled, most not. They crashed into each other. They made mistakes. They laughed at themselves and kept dancing. I stood at the edge of the barn, her sensors overwhelmed by the data. By every metric she knew, this celebration was a failure. The plan had fallen apart almost immediately. Execution was poor. Efficiency was terrible. Coordination was nearly non-existent. So why were the humans so happy? A small human child approached her, maybe 7 or 8 years old by A's estimate. "Why aren't you dancing?" the child asked. "I am observing," I said through her translator. "That's boring," the child declared. She grabbed A's manipulator appendage with her tiny hand. "Come on." Before I could protest, she was being pulled onto the dance floor. The humans around her cheered. Someone showed her a simple step. She tried to copy it and failed. The humans laughed, but not cruelly. They adjusted, showed her again, encouraged her. For exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, I stopped observing and started participating. She moved awkwardly to the music, surrounded by humans who moved just as awkwardly but with complete unself-conscious joy. In those 4 minutes and 37 seconds, I felt something she had never experienced at a celebration. She felt connected, not through optimized pheromones or calculated social algorithms, but through something raw and real and utterly unplanned. When the song ended, she was breathing hard, and her colors were cycling through patterns she didn't recognize from her own emotional index. An elderly human man smiled at her as he walked past. "Best weddings are the ones that go wrong," he said. "Gives everyone something to remember." A return to her observation post, but she barely looked at her sensors for the rest of the night. She watched the bride and groom cut their lopsided cake while everyone cheered. She watched the grandfather dance with his granddaughter, both of them laughing. She watched two elderly women sit in the corner, holding hands and crying happy tears because their children had just gotten married. As the celebration wound down near midnight, hours past the scheduled end time, I finally understood the problem. The humans weren't celebrating perfectly. They were celebrating authentically. An authentic joy, she realized, couldn't be optimized. She filed her initial report that night, knowing it would cause controversy. Recommendation, she wrote in her conclusion. We need to study humanity further, not because they celebrate better than us, but because they remember how to celebrate at all. Part 2. The report from a landed in the Grand Celebration Directorate like a stone thrown into still water. The ripples spread quickly across the Galactic Confederation, reaching species who had not thought about the quality of their celebrations in centuries. Within 2 months, a full research team descended on Earth. 12 species sent their best celebration scholars, cultural analysts, and social scientists. They spread across the planet, armed with sophisticated observation equipment and detailed research protocols. Dr. X, a sociologist, chose to study a human birthday party. They were masters of pheromone-based social harmony, and X expected to find some chemical explanation for human celebration success. Perhaps humans secreted bonding compounds that their instruments had not yet detected. The birthday party was for a 7-year-old human named Emma. 20 children and their parents gathered in a suburban home's backyard. X watched as the human parents set up games and activities with what appeared to be careful planning. The planning lasted approximately 14 minutes before complete chaos erupted. One child started crying because he didn't win musical chairs. Another child ate too much cake and vomited in the bushes. 3 children got into an argument about the rules of tag that nearly escalated into a physical fight. The broke on the first hit, sending candy everywhere and triggering a scrambling mob of small humans that looked like a feeding frenzy. Emma, the birthday girl, spent 10 minutes locked in the bathroom crying because someone said her dress was ugly. X documented all of this with growing confusion. This wasn't a celebration. This was barely controlled chaos. He started drafting a report explaining that human children's celebrations were simply too primitive to provide useful data. Then Emma came out of the bathroom. Her best friend had gone in with her, and the two emerged holding hands. Emma's eyes were red, but she was smiling. Her friend had given her a bracelet, a cheap thing made of plastic beads that probably cost less than 1 credit. "You're my best friend forever," Emma said, hugging the other child. X's instruments detected a neurochemical surge in both children. He checked his readings 3 times, certain there was an error. The emotional bonding intensity was off the charts, far beyond what his people achieved with optimized pheromone exposure. The party continued with more disasters. A game went wrong. More cake ended up on faces than in mouths. The children fought and made up and fought again. But through it all, X noticed something his instruments couldn't fully capture. Every adult at the party was smiling, not at the planned activities, but at the chaos itself. "Wasn't that a disaster?" he asked one parent as the party wound down. The parent laughed. "That's how you know it was a good party. Emma will remember this birthday for years." "Because it went well?" X asked. "Because it was real," the parent said. "Because things went wrong and we all dealt with it together. That's what she'll remember. Not the perfect cake or the planned games, but the time she cried and her friend made her feel better. The time all the kids went crazy over the realness of it." Across the planet, other researchers were having similar revelations. Commander In, a crystalline being from a species that experienced emotion through harmonic resonances, studied a human funeral. His people had eliminated death ceremonies entirely, considering them inefficient expressions of unavoidable loss. When humans continued holding elaborate funerals and memorial services, The galactic community had considered it a quaint primitive custom. The funeral was for an elderly man named Robert. In expected sadness, perhaps some ceremonial grieving, and then a quick return to normal life. Instead, he witnessed something that shattered his understanding of celebration. The humans gathered and cried. They told stories about Robert, some sad but many funny. They laughed through their tears. They hugged each other for long periods, sometimes without speaking. The ceremony was scheduled for 1 hour but lasted nearly 4, because people kept remembering new stories they wanted to share. Robert once accidentally locked himself in his own garage, someone said, laughing and crying at the same time. We had to break the window to get him out. He was so embarrassed, but he laughed about it for years after. The crowd laughed, a sound tinged with sadness but also with warmth. And didn't understand. This was a celebration of death, of loss, of something negative. Why were the humans mixing joy with their sorrow? His people would find this psychologically unhealthy. An elderly woman noticed him observing. She approached with a kind smile. "You're one of the researchers, aren't you, studying how we celebrate?" "Yes," In said, "but I do not understand. This is not a celebration. This man has died." "We're celebrating his life," the woman said. "All of it. The good parts and the silly parts and even the sad parts. We're remembering that he was real and he mattered and he changed us." "But you are in pain," In observed. "Of course we are," the woman said. "We loved him. That's the point. We're not trying to be happy right now. We're trying to be honest about what we feel. The joy and the grief all mixed together because that's what real love is." In processed this for a long moment. Your celebrations are not about creating optimal emotions. "No," the woman said gently. "They're about creating real emotions. The real ones are messy and complicated, but they're ours. They matter because we actually feel them, not because some algorithm says we should." The research team met weekly to share findings. Their reports grew increasingly contradictory. By every objective measure, human celebrations were disasters. They were inefficient, unpredictable, and frequently failed to achieve their stated goals. But the subjective data told a different story. Humans formed deeper social bonds through their celebrations than any species in the Confederation. These bonds lasted decades, sometimes lifetimes. Humans used memories of shared celebrations as foundations for their most important relationships. "I attended a human wedding 30 years ago," one woman told Researcher or of the collective. "The groom's drunk uncle gave a speech that was supposed to be funny, but ended up being kind of mean. Everyone got uncomfortable. Then the bride's mother stood up and told an even more embarrassing story about the uncle to deflect attention. The whole room erupted in laughter. That moment of awkward discomfort and how we all navigated it together, that bonded all of us. I'm still friends with people I met that day, and we still joke about the uncle's speech. Or tried to understand. So the error created the bond." "Not the error exactly," the woman said. "The fact that we were all real people dealing with a real awkward situation in real time. We weren't following a script. We were just being human together." The breakthrough came during a research meeting when I presented her analysis of a multicultural festival she had observed. The festival combined traditions from 6 different human cultures. By design, some of those traditions conflicted with each other. The festival violated every principle of harmonious celebration planning, reported. Religious dietary restrictions conflicted with cultural food traditions. Music from one culture clashed with the aesthetic preferences of another. Scheduling conflicts meant some people missed important elements of their own cultural presentations. "So it was a failure?" asked X. "No," I said, her colors shifting to a pattern that indicated deep thought. "It was the most successful celebration I have observed, because the conflicts forced the humans to communicate, to compromise, to learn about each other's traditions and explain their own. A child from one culture asked why another culture's dancers moved a certain way, and that conversation led to the child joining the dance and the dancers learning about her culture's movements. She pulled up biometric data. The emotional engagement levels were extraordinary, not because everything was perfect, but because everyone was actively participating. They were present, they were vulnerable, they were real. The room fell silent as the research team absorbed this. Finally, Commander spoke. "We have been asking the wrong question. We asked why human celebrations work despite their imperfections. The correct question is, do human celebrations work because of their imperfections?" "That cannot be correct," protested an elder. "Perfection is always superior to imperfection." "In engineering, yes," I said quietly. "But humans are not celebrating engineering achievements. They are celebrating connection, and connection requires vulnerability. It requires showing your real self, mistakes and all. It requires accepting others' real selves, flaws and all." X remembered the birthday party, the crying child and her friend's cheap bracelet. "When everything is perfect," he said slowly, "there is no need for anyone to help each other. No need to adapt or compromise or show kindness in the face of difficulty. Perfection eliminates the opportunities for connection." The meeting ended with more questions than answers, but the research team was beginning to understand. Humans didn't celebrate perfectly. They celebrated authentically. An authentic celebration required accepting imperfection, embracing vulnerability, and being genuinely present with other imperfect, vulnerable beings. It was messy and inefficient, and sometimes painful. It was also the most powerful form of social bonding the Confederation had ever observed. The team compiled their findings into a comprehensive report. As they prepared to present it to the Galactic Confederation, they knew it would be controversial. They were essentially recommending that advanced civilizations learn from a species that had only just achieved interstellar travel. But the data was undeniable. Humanity had preserved something that the rest of the galaxy had optimized away. The question now was whether other species could relearn what humans had never forgotten. I added one final note to the report, something that wasn't strictly scientific but felt important. Authentic joy cannot be planned. It can only be experienced, and it only exists in the imperfect space between who we pretend to be and who we really are. Part 3. The report went viral across the Galactic Confederation in a way that no academic document had in living memory. Within days, it had been downloaded billions of times across thousands of worlds. Within weeks, the response had fractured the galaxy into passionate factions. Conservative groups called the report dangerous romanticism. The High Council issued a statement declaring that of optimization cannot be dismissed based on observations of a single primitive species. The Scientific Academy published a counter-analysis arguing that human celebrations only worked because humans lacked the sophistication to recognize their own inefficiency. But others saw something different in the data. On Prime, a group of young adults organized what they called a spontaneous gathering with no schedule and no planned activities. It was a disaster. They had no experience with spontaneity and didn't know what to do without instructions. Some stood awkwardly in silence. Others tried to force fun according to what they thought spontaneous fun should look like. The authorities shut it down after 2 hours for failure to file proper social gathering permits. Yet the attempt sparked something. Within days, similar experiments were happening on dozens of worlds. Most failed spectacularly. A wedding where the couple deliberately avoided pheromone optimization descended into arguments about seating arrangements and menu choices. A shard memorial ceremony with intentional imperfection just felt hollow because the imperfections were calculated, not real. The problem was becoming clear. You couldn't fake authenticity. Ambassador watched the galactic chaos from Earth with a mixture of amusement and concern. Her office was flooded with requests. Every alien species wanted to send more observers. Some wanted humanity to export celebration consultants to their worlds. A few even suggested that the Confederation should mandate adoption of human celebration protocols galaxy-wide. That last suggestion made Sarah laugh out loud. "You can't mandate authenticity," she told Coordinator during one of their regular calls. "That's the whole point." "Then how do we learn?" asked, and his colors showed a deep blue that Sarah had learned meant frustration. "Your report has shown us what we have lost but not how to regain it." Sarah thought about this. "Let me ask you something. When was the last time you tried something you weren't certain you could do perfectly?" Colors cycled through several patterns before settling on a dull gray. "We do not attempt tasks we cannot complete optimally. It would be inefficient." "That's your problem right there," Sarah said gently. "Being authentic means being willing to fail, to be seen failing, to try anyway because the trying matters more than the result." A long silence followed. Finally said, "This is more difficult than I anticipated." "The best things usually are," Sarah replied. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Who had stayed on Earth to continue her research, asked Ambassador if she could attend a human celebration not as an observer, but as a participant. "What kind of celebration?" Sarah asked. "Any kind," said. Her colors were cycling rapidly, indicating nervousness. "I want to experience what it feels like to celebrate without analyzing, to just be present." Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled. "I have just the thing." 2 days later, I found herself in Sarah's apartment along with a dozen humans of various ages. It was Sarah's daughter's college graduation party, a casual gathering with no formal structure. Food was laid out on tables, music played in the background, and people clustered in conversation groups that formed and reformed naturally. I stood frozen in the doorway, her observation equipment left behind. Without her sensors and analytical frameworks, she felt naked and uncertain. Sarah's daughter, Maya, noticed her hesitation and approached with a warm smile. "You must be Mom told me about you. Come on, let me introduce you around." For the next 4 hours, I experienced something entirely new. She talked with humans about their lives, their hopes, their fears. She listened to Maya's grandfather tell rambling stories about his own college years. She helped Sarah's brother fix a broken speaker, even though neither of them really knew what they were doing. She played a card game with 3 humans and lost every single round. At one point, Maya's grandmother asked about celebrations. I tried to explain the mathematical precision, the optimized joy schedules, the perfect execution. "That sounds exhausting," the grandmother said kindly. "All that pressure to get everything right." "But how else do you ensure a successful celebration?" I asked. The grandmother laughed. "Honey, the celebrations I remember best were the ones where everything went wrong. The time the turkey caught fire at Thanksgiving. The time my son's birthday cake spelled his name wrong. The time we got snowed in during Christmas and had to improvise everything. Those are the ones we still talk about decades later." "Why?" I asked. "Because we were all in it together," the grandmother said. "When things go wrong, that's when you really see who people are, how they handle problems, how they help each other, how they laugh instead of getting upset. Perfect celebrations are like perfect photographs. Nice to look at, but you can't touch them. They're not real." Later, as the party wound down, I found herself sitting on the apartment balcony with Sarah, watching the sunset over the city. "Today, I did not observe," I said quietly. "I participated, and I understand now what your grandmother meant. For the first time, I experienced a celebration rather than analyzing one." "And?" Sarah asked. "It was terrifying," I admitted. "I made mistakes. I said foolish things. I did not know the correct protocols. By my people's standards, I performed inadequately." "But," Sarah prompted, hearing the unspoken word. "But I felt connected," I said, her colors shifting to a warm gold Sarah had never seen before. "To your family, to the moment, to something real. I have attended hundreds of celebrations, each one executed perfectly. But today, at this imperfect human gathering, I felt something I have never felt before. I felt like I belonged. Tears formed in A's large eyes, a biological response she had only observed in humans before. I finally understand what we lost, she said, and I do not know if my people can ever get it back. Sarah put a hand on A's shoulder. Do you want to know what I think? I think you just took the first step toward getting it back. You were vulnerable. You participated without knowing the outcome. You let yourself be seen making mistakes. That's authentic. But I am just one, A said. How can one individual change an entire civilization? The same way any change happens, Sarah said. One person at a time, you teach someone else, they teach someone else. Maybe it takes generations. Maybe some species never fully embrace it, but the knowledge is out there now. The possibility exists. Over the following months, something unexpected began happening. Aliens who had spent time on Earth, genuinely participating in human celebrations rather than just observing them, began to change. They brought something back to their home worlds, something that couldn't be measured by instruments or captured in reports. They brought back experience. X returned to his and organized a gathering with a shocking new rule: no pheromone optimization allowed, just natural interaction. It was awkward and uncomfortable, and some participants left early, but others stayed and they talked, really talked, in a way they never had before. Without the pheromones smoothing over every interaction, conflicts emerged, but so did genuine connection. Commander In began holding what he called memory circles, where Shard would gather and share stories about their lives, including failures and embarrassments. At first, his people were scandalized, but slowly others joined. They discovered that imperfect stories about imperfect experiences created bonds that perfect resonance never had. The movement grew slowly, facing resistance at every turn. Many species weren't ready to embrace imperfection. Some never would be. But pockets of change emerged across the Confederation, small communities of beings who were relearning how to celebrate authentically. The Galactic Confederation formally established the Academy of Authentic Celebration on Earth, in the same rural Oregon town where I had attended her first human wedding. Students from across the galaxy came to learn, not from lectures or data, but from experience. Sarah served as the Academy's human liaison. She often met with new students on their first day, and she always told them the same thing: you're going to mess up here. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to fail at things. That's not a bug in the program. That's the whole point. Authentic celebration isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. 1 year after the Academy's founding, Sarah attended a celebration organized entirely by alien students, with no human involvement. It was a mixed-species gathering, combining traditions from a dozen different worlds. The planning was chaotic. 3 species had conflicting dietary requirements. The scheduled activities ran over time. 2 students got into an argument about the proper way to acknowledge honored guests. By galactic standards, it was a mess. By human standards, it was a pretty normal party. Sarah watched as a young helped a student fix a broken decoration. She saw a shard and then laughing together over a shared mistake. She witnessed a moment when the whole group had to improvise a solution to an unexpected problem, and the energy in the room as they worked together was electric. Who now taught at the Academy, joined Sarah at the edge of the gathering. Her colors were a vibrant mix of warm tones that Sarah had learned meant contentment. They are doing well, A said, watching her students. They are, Sarah agreed. It will take generations for this to truly spread across the Confederation, A said. Some species may never embrace it fully. The change will be slow and difficult. That's okay, Sarah said. The best changes usually are slow and difficult. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration unfold with all its imperfect beauty. Ambassador, A said quietly, Why are humans willing to share this? You could have kept this knowledge to yourselves, used it as an advantage. Sarah thought back to the question she had answered that first day in the barn when I had asked almost the same thing. Because joy isn't something you hoard, she said. It's something you share. The more people who know how to find authentic joy, the better the galaxy becomes for everyone, including us. But what if other species learn to celebrate as well as humans? I asked. What if we become better at authentic joy than you are? Sarah laughed, a genuine, unscripted sound. Then we'll come to you to relearn what we've taught you. That's how sharing knowledge works. Everyone gets better together. A student called over to help mediate a dispute about music choices. A's colors flickered with nervousness, but she went anyway, willing to try even though she wasn't certain she could help. Sarah stayed at the edge of the room, watching the chaos unfold. Someone dropped food on the floor. Someone else's attempt at a traditional dance went hilariously wrong. A scheduled speech went on too long and people got restless. It was imperfect and inefficient and sometimes awkward. It was also real and joyful and meaningful. Through all the mistakes and miscommunications, genuine connections were forming. Bonds were being created that would last far beyond this single evening. Across the galaxy, Sarah knew similar gatherings were happening. Small groups of beings learning to be vulnerable, to embrace imperfection, to celebrate authentically. It was a quiet revolution, spreading slowly but steadily through a confederation that had forgotten how to feel real joy. Humanity had given the galaxy a gift, but it wasn't a technology or a resource. It was a reminder of something the galaxy had once known but had optimized away. The simple, difficult, beautiful truth that real connection requires real presence, and real presence means being willing to be imperfect together. Sarah smiled as she watched an alien student trip over their own feet during a dance, then laugh at themselves while their friends helped them up. The students' embarrassment was real, but so was the warmth of the community that accepted them anyway. That, Sarah thought, was the whole point. Not the perfection, but the acceptance. Not the flawless execution, but the genuine attempt. Not the optimized outcome, but the authentic experience. The galaxy was slowly remembering how to celebrate. And in those imperfect, chaotic, beautiful moments of real connection, it was finally remembering how to feel genuine joy.